Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Stud.
And I'm Ron Stud. We're really excited. We've got an awesome guest. And I don't know, Alex, I think we've had a lot of really awesome guests in the past, but this one probably known both of us, probably longer than any of the guests we've had on so far.
Well, I think he's known me my entire life.
He's awesome. He was the best man at my wedding, and we go back forever. So with that, let's bring on Brandon Rohwer. So Brandon, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Brandon, we're really excited to have you here. And of course, as part of our show, one of the things that we always try to do is start off with a bit of a guest introduction, a fire round. How do you know us?
My dad went to high school with your mom, and Ron, being a year ahead of me in school, when I was starting only in middle school, my parents were looking to reduce trips across town during the day. So they said, hey, the Studs live right across the railroad tracks here. Why don't we see if Ann's kids want to carpool with them? And Ron and I became carpool buddies, and the rest is history.
That it is. And it's kind of weird because we were also going to the same elementary school, but it wasn't until middle school that we really kind of got to know each other.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. I think that's really one of those things that comes down to just when you're that young, being one grade apart. Yep. Sometimes makes a big difference, especially, for me, who was an only child and didn't really have like an older or younger sibling to get to know the other people in that grade. I pretty much just knew the people that were in my class.
Yeah.
Eastview Elementary.
That it was. And,
Eastview, baby.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. A little bit about what is that makes you Brandon.
I just passed my 14th anniversary of living in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been here for a while. I used to do a lot of work in movies, doing publicity for movies, and now I work in social media as a content strategist and copywriter and social media producer.
And have you lived in any of the other boroughs, or has it just been Brooklyn this entire time?
I lived in Queens for my first year in New York, but there wasn't really a lot happening in the neighborhood I lived in. So when I was hanging out and socializing, it was really just in Manhattan usually. So nothing notable. I know there's a lot of great places in Queens, like Astoria has a lot of great stuff specifically, but the neighborhood I lived in, nothing to write home about. So it's been Brooklyn ever since.
Well, we're gonna have to definitely talk a little bit more about your time in New York over 14 years. But before we do all that, there's always a very important part of the shows that Ron and I have, which is let's discuss the drinks that we're having. Brandon, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking a Bengali IPA from 6 Point Brewery from right here in Brooklyn, New York.
What about you, Ron?
So I'm starting this off with a little bit of Malort, and the other thing I'm going to have is a little bit of Buffalo Trace. What are you having, Alex?
Well, I'm preparation for tomorrow. Oh. I am down some Labatt Blue. By the time this airs, it'll be after the Bills game, but we're airing this on Saturday night, so I am having some Labatt's Blue for the Buffalo Bills tomorrow.
All right. So, Brandon, I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this question with you just because you're certainly somebody who appreciates the arts. Pick a piece of art that you feel that represents you. It could be a song, movie, book, painting, even a game. Tell us what that is.
So I'm going to go with my favorite movie of all time.
Okay.
As you mentioned, I am a person that appreciates the arts, and this is a fine work of auteurism from the cinematic world, and that movie is Gremlins 2: The New Batch.
Ooh.
Naturally. When I think of great pieces, Gremlins 2, of course.
I love this movie. I love Gremlins 2 because it completely exploits the trend of sequels from the 80s and 90s, where if you're making a sequel, they didn't have the whole shared cinematic universe or the ongoing storylines planned out 3 movies in advance like they did now. Mm-hmm. It was really just, here's a movie, it made a lot of money, let's make more money and get a sequel out there. And so they weren't intended to continue the story necessarily. So it's really just, how can we do the first movie but bigger?
Yeah.
And after years of trying to make Gremlins 2, Joe Dante, the director of the first one, wasn't so keen on it. Warner Brothers shopped it around, tried to get many other people on board. Nothing happened with it. And they went back to Joe Dante and were basically like, we'll basically let you do anything you want. And he's like, anything, huh? And so what we have is what is essentially a live action Looney Tune movie.
Yeah.
And it's got this brilliant the brilliant plot device of it is the fact that it just takes place in this giant skyscraper that's brand new, newly opened in New York City. And that's just a device to put anything they want. The key thing being the genetics lab happens to be a tenant in there, which just lets them come up with all kinds of crazy gremlins. It's one of those things where it's like the simplest device, but it still serves a purpose.
It works very effectively.
Exactly. It's very effectively. You don't need much to just get all this weird, goofy stuff in there. It's just a lot of fun to watch.
So is this a metaphor to your life in any way, Brandon? I mean, where does it come to it speaks to you?
So in college, if you're somebody that's in college studying film, not everyone by any means, but there are a lot of people that are very much like, I have to like all the classic auteurs. I'm a Kubrick guy. I love Aronofsky. I love David Lynch. Those guys are great. Not saying there's anything wrong with them because I love all those guys. But I met so many people throughout film school that are just students. They have no, actual lived experience in the film world. They're so humorless and just don't make room for the stuff that's just fun. And I have to admit, I would be kind of like snotty like that. It took many years for me to come around to the idea of like, no, I can enjoy what Stanley Kubrick is doing, and I can also love the hell out of the Fast and the Furious movies.
Yeah.
Gremlins 2 is a great bridge for that for me, because it was something that, I loved as a kid, and you know what? This is a fine piece of film. There's a lot in there worth discussing.
Yeah.
I love that, Brandon.
We'll have to kind of get over into your career and interest questions, but you've passed through the fire round, so great job on that. I'll let Alex, we'll let you kick this off with, I think, one of Brandon's first career moves in his life.
It's only fair that I ask this endeavor. Brandon, I remember this when I was really young, but I remember you became a commissioner of an underground wrestling league. Tell us about that.
Yes, the UWL, the Unnamed Wrestling League. This was all of our friend group at Olean High School, our venture into backyard wrestling, which, I wasn't commissioner for much of the time. That the leadership roles got passed around for a bit, but it was basically the one thing that we all did on Sunday. It had a few different forms. It started out on my parents' trampoline, and then for a while it was on the trampoline at the stud residence. Alex was quite a formidable competitor.
At 8 years old. Yeah, I did have a belt, the world belt, for about 5 minutes.
Well, you weren't the world champion. You were the El Nino champion, which is the mid-card title. Still nothing to sneeze at. Just had to fact check there. Notable. You lost it to Goliath, aka Dustin Weir, the very tall friend that lived across the street from the studs.
That's also led on to, I know you've had a huge fascination and interest in professional wrestling. What's going on lately in the world of wrestling, and how has that changed kind of since the 90s?
So the biggest thing happening now is the existence of All Elite Wrestling, probably, which is, for the first time in about 20 years now, the first major competition to WWE. They have a show on TNT. They have viewers. They have a billionaire in its own right funding and backing it. So they're able to get big names like Chris Jericho, John Moxley, who is a guy that came over from WWE. They have a major network broadcasting their show every week. So they're able to basically offset the monopoly that WWE had for so long on the industry. So AEW is very much focused on telling a story, first and foremost, and developing their characters. They're able to trust that they can, over time, build up new main event stars. Whereas WWE has always been in a rut where most WrestleManias, they're going to call back like John Cena, who hasn't been a full-time wrestler in a few years now, or they're going to get Triple H to wrestle a match. These are guys that are not appearing on their shows every week, but they're usually used as kind of a crutch for WWE to kind of hopefully bring in ratings and bring in ticket sales.
So are you kind of suggesting that the WWE might be kind of going back to the well too much for these names that, fans of 15, 20 years ago loved?
Oh, absolutely. So the thing is, those guys are great. They're also not the people appearing on the show every week. they're not going to get people to reliably tune in throughout the year. They really only bring them back for their peak seasons. So like WrestleMania in April, SummerSlam in August, like that's it. And these guys, they're not going to be around forever. And companies just neglecting the chance to take younger stars that are new to the business, new to the shows, and really make them look like legitimate stars.
Yeah.
There are things that they can do in their own right, but there's a concept that is basically known as 50-50 booking, where they will put a wrestler out there who will win a match, but then lose a match. And the idea is that the idea of 50-50 booking is it basically indicates that they don't want anyone to necessarily look better than anyone else, which is kind of weird, right? Like, you're going to have some people that in a real athletic competition, you're going to have some people that rise to the top. It's not going to be that evenly matched all the time.
Right.
And it just gets, when you have 5 hours plus of TV to fill a week, it just gets repetitive and it just gets really frustrating to watch.
Well, and I would just think from a plot development standpoint, if certain people can never lose, how on earth do you actually progress?
Yeah, exactly. And it just gets very frustrating to watch those weekly shows from week to week, where they just don't pull the trigger on the next big thing ever. Whereas AEW is very much invested in, like, they're very invested in long-term storytelling. So, for instance, there's this guy, Orange Cassidy. He's a very unconventional wrestler, and a lot of people never thought this guy's gimmick would translate into a big-time wrestling league. Basically, his gimmick is he's lazy.
Okay.
So
I'm sold.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
So what he'll do, and you should look up some videos of him, but basically what he'll do, he'll just like walk out to the ring as slow as possible. He'll just like roll under the ropes. He'll get in there. His whole thing is like putting his hands in his pockets and just kind of like being like chill, like whatever. He has like very, like when he does kicks, they're often very half-hearted.
Okay.
And it's all just like part of the shtick.
Yeah.
He's an incredibly talented wrestler, but he just has this really notable gimmick that captures people's attention. AEW spent a good part of the summer taking the time to build him up into one of their next big main event stars. And they did that over a long series of matches with some of their more marquee players and making him look good. And the other thing is, like, even when he would lose a match, he still looked like $1 million.
Yeah.
Because they're not afraid to let them show, like, let these wrestlers show that they're completely competent, even if they're going to be a loser at the end.
Yeah. Speaking of kind of the dynamics of the winning and the losing, who's your favorite heel or bad guy when it comes to wrestling?
All right. This may not be the best in class, may not be the best heel of all time. The heel I have a soft spot for, and all of my time watching wrestling, is the Big Boss Man. Because he had a streak in the 90s where he was just doing this completely ludicrous stuff to get under the skins of his competitors. And I think the one everyone remembers is when he was feuding with the Big Show. And the Big Show's dad died, and the Big Boss Man drove into the funeral at the graveyard and tied the Big Show's father's casket to the back of his police car, which looked like the Bluesmobile from the Blues Brothers, and just drove off with it throughout the cemetery. Just one of the dumbest things, but it makes me laugh every time. So, top heel, Big Boss Man.
You know, Brandon, you talk about both of these leagues, and you're obviously an expert in social media. How do you think both of these leagues are handling their social media interaction, especially with the younger generation?
Oh, I mean, like, these companies have so much money to pour into that. Like, their social media machines are just their social media machines are a full force. And it's kind of interesting to see how the wrestlers themselves have adapted this for their characters, because it's just a completely different ways for wrestlers to reach out to the fans. Like, there's this one guy, MJF, who's in AEW. He's basically the next top heel. And he just like completely has latched onto that as a way to like run his mouth and, you know, curse at the fans and give them a piece of his mind. Like, he's able to, like, he actually did this thing. I don't remember exactly what he said, but the gist of it was he posted a very sincere tweet about how his grandfather, he was very close with his grandfather, and his grandfather recently passed away, but he still managed to do it in a way that was this moving tribute to his grandfather, yet completely turned it around to be just like a piece of shit heel.
That's awesome. Kind of switching topics, Brandon. I want to get into, you spent a lot of time in the film world in terms of film festivals and all that you were involved in traveling the country. I also always heard about this story, the MacGruber parties that you started and implemented. Do you mind telling us how that got started? What was that all about?
So one year at the Sundance Film Festival, because when I worked in publicity, I would hang out with a lot of film writers. So those were, those are a lot of my friends in the film industry are film writers to this day. And they were the people I would talk to and hang out with the most in the downtime at Sundance. So there was one year where this actually wasn't initiated by me, but somebody was like, we're going to have a party and we're going to hang out and watch MacGruber. And it kind of like morphed into the MacGruber party. So the next year at Sundance, I brought a copy of MacGruber and I was like, all right, which night are we doing the MacGruber party? And that just kind of morphed into its thing where people would hang out when it was a quiet night at the festival, get drinks and watch MacGruber.
But I want to hear about it. The star of MacGruber found out.
Oh, that's right. So yeah, the star of MacGruber found out. My friend Mike was interviewing Will Forte, and he mentioned MacGruber has its fans. And Will Forte was like, no one, people don't like MacGruber because it bombed at the box office. And he didn't realize, people have caught on to it. But Mike was like, no, like people like it. Like my friend throws a MacGruber, like make sure there's a MacGruber party at Sundance. And he's like, what? No, you're crazy. And the publicist walks in and Mike's like, Rob, tell him about the MacGruber party. And Rob, the publicist, is like, yeah, like all the writers like go do this every year, and I'm trying to get them to come watch my movies, and they're like, no, we got to go to the MacGruber party. It's the MacGruber party night, which is really like, yeah, it's been like it's kind of like the important night for a lot of people to just like blow off steam, because it's usually like 5 or 6 days in and trudging through the snow and just having to run from one thing to the next in Park City, which doesn't have the best public transportation infrastructure at a time like that, especially when it's super snowy. It's like the perfect opportunity to just like blow off some steam with everyone.
So Will Forte showed up, right? And what happened?
Well, he didn't show up to a MacGruber party.
Okay.
He learned about it in this interview.
I was going to say, but at some point you actually got introduced to Will Forte, right?
So I've met Will Forte twice. So coming out of that interview, this was during the Tribeca Film Festival. Mike told me about the interview interaction. He's like, yeah, the party for that's tonight. You gotta come with me. You'll be my plus one, and you'll meet Will. Like, he's so stoked about the MacGruber party. And I got there, and when Will was there and Mike grabbed him and he brought him over and introduced him to me, Will was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. Like, I gotta give you a big hug. You guys want drinks? Let's get some drinks. And he just like was continually like making sure that we were taken care of at his party for his new film. He introduced us all to his mom. It was great. He's one of the nicest people in the world. And then a few years later, the Alamo Drafthouse here in Brooklyn was hosting a special screening of MacGruber on a very special date, June 9th, 6/9. Apparently, Will requested that date specifically. Nicest day of the year. I went with Mike, and a friend of ours was the artistic director at the Draft House at the time, and we all got drinks after, and Will very graciously gave me a page from the actual MacGruber Book of Clues from the movie, the KFBR 392 book.
Wow.
That's incredible. Do you still have it to this day? Do you have it hung up somewhere?
It's framed and hung up. Absolutely.
Good to hear.
Yeah, in the frame, it looks like something somebody scribbled on, but if you know, you know.
Gotcha.
That's awesome. I feel like I have to ask this next question, Ron.
That's fair.
Because Ron and Brandon, you two, for so many years, were always thick as thieves. You always had something going on. There was always a plan, right? You were either hanging out at the Olean Mall, one of you was a congressman. There was always something crazy happening. And there were fizzies, and there were, if you remember those drinks, and Mountain Eckerd. You guys always had so many crazy things going on in the 90s. I got to hear, Brandon, in your opinion, what is the craziest story, adventure, experience that you had with Ron?
One of the things that sticks out in my mind is Ron is directly involved, but Ron actually wasn't there for this.
Okay.
This is just like a weird happenstance thing. Ron, I would like to hear your opinion because that might jog my memory for some other things.
Okay.
In college, when Ron was at Misericordia, I was driving down with my friend Kyle. I was still living in Olean going to JCC. Kyle and I were driving down to go see Ron at the dorm. And this was before, GPS. We had printed out like the Yahoo Maps thing. And I am, unless I am able to look at it in front of me, I am a terrible navigator while driving. The road that leads up to the college. So I missed the turn. And Kyle said, "Oh, I think that was the road." So I was like, okay. And then I had to go to take the next turn, which was this road at a really weird angle that fed back onto the road at another really weird angle. And I turned out and I hit this car that was coming the other way. And it was a very, very small hit. Like it's just literally just like a tap. But still, like I pulled into the parking lot that was right there. These girls pulled into the parking lot that was right there. Got out. There's like this very, very, millimeter sized ding in my headlight, and their car was fine. And I was like, "By the way, we're driving up to Misericordia. Do you know like which way that is?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it's right up the street. You can just follow us up there." Great. So we follow these girls up. We park. I'm like, "Oh, by the way, so our friend lives in this dorm. Which one is that?" And they're like, "Oh, that's the dorm we live in. It's over here." I'm like, Do you know my friend Ron? That's who I'm going to see. And they're like, I don't know. Is he like kind of tall and loud and have a really annoying roommate? I'm like, that sounds like him. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. It lives down the hall from us." And so they just brought me up, and instead of having to like call around and be like, "Hey, come get us," we just like went up there and knocked on the door.
Yeah. They're just like, "Oh, hey, yeah, no, that roommate. Wow." Yeah, he was.
Didn't you say he used to listen to Kids Bop all the time?
Yeah,
or something?
he listened to Kids Bop, and he also had stuffed animals. Actually,
Well, I want to hear what you think, Ron.
Man, I think I would have to go with I think fizzies. Fizzies were definitely, I think, a highlight. So, Alex, you were kind of giving a great lead and introduction. Olean is a fun place to live, but unfortunately, it's like one of those places where you need to have creativity to make it fun and interesting. And that's why we did some of those really goofy things, like have an entourage of people following you around in the mall and saying, "But Mr. Senator," and somebody's recording with a camera, which that was fun. But I think one of the biggest things was once one of us had a vehicle, and I think it was Dan, right? It was Dan who had
It was Dan, yeah.
Yeah. So Dan had this minivan, and we found that there was this place, I forget, it was like a dollar store or something.
Oh, it was Odds and Ends.
Odds and Ends.
Done by Walmart.
Yes. So this store just had all sorts of weird random crap in it. And one of the things we found was fizzies. Now, fizzies, I think it's basically an Alka-Seltzer tablet with some slight flavoring. You're supposed to mix it with, like, you put it in water, and it's like, "Oh, hey, look, you've got a carbonated beverage. There's your root beer," or whatever. And, that's all good and fine, but we found a better use for that. If you take the tablets and just drop them in your mouth and you just, chew them up, you'll start foaming like a rabbit dog. and we use that to great effect because what we would do is Dan would be driving, and then one of us would just be in the side of the car and going down the road in Olean. And it's not a very big town, but we'd go down the road, and at a stop sign or something, all of a sudden we're chewing on the tablet and you're seeing like red foaming ooze coming out of somebody's mouth. And as long as one of us were really acting into it, the people in the cars next to us were just in complete shock and awe. Like, what is going on? Is that person dying? And it was a lot of fun. So I remember, I think specifically the bridge next to the Olean General Hospital. I remember there being a light there, and you could just see this lady who it reminded me of like something from the movie Akira, where they saw something completely shocking, and she was just like, and it's unfortunate that our listeners can't see what I'm doing, but their mouth was completely agape. She was just taking her hand right to her nose and her mouth, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, what is that?" Oh, and we were just having a lot of fun with that.
Except for Dan. I don't think Dan enjoyed that, because I remember one day we had to drive up to your house so we could hose off the van because Jimmy had his head out the window and there was just like brown crap all over the side of the van.
That was root beer.
That was the root beer flavor. Yeah. I think that was definitely one of the fun, the more entertaining things. I think the other thing too was at Eckerd when the police officer got upset with us about the inflatable sofa. That was so that was interesting, and I still like to kind of bring that up to some folks. So basically we would go to this place after work, and after school, not after work, but after school we'd go there. We'd get usually a drink of Mount Eckerd, which was like the Mountain Dew, but we always thought that it was superior, I think, because it was made with real Cajun herbs and spices. We'd hang out there, and one day we noticed that they were actually selling in their like discount bin like an inflatable sofa, and it was like, perfect, an inflatable sofa. Now when we hang out in front of this place, we can actually enjoy our time there. And things got a little bit crazy at one point. I want to say it was Gabe was actually doing like somersaults in a crosswalk.
Yep.
And
I think Gabe and possibly Grant were having some type of shenanigans in the crosswalk on Olean's busiest street.
Yes. So naturally, police officer gets called into this, and he basically is like, "Hey, you guys need to get out of here. This is loitering. You need to get out of here. Scram!" And I was actually learning about New York Penal Code at the time, which was fun. So I did kind of say,
naturally.
Right.
Naturally, I mean, who doesn't? When you're a 16-year-old kid, learn about New York Penal Code.
Well, that was so I could become a youth court judge. But anyway, so he was saying that we were loitering, and I was like, "Well, all due respect, officer. Number one, there's a party of less than 10. We have been on this premise for less than an hour, and we also have purchased goods from said premise within the past hour." And he just looked at me and he's like, "Well, that's good that you know that." I think I actually quoted him the code because I just was like, this could come in useful someday. And he actually did say, "Yeah, but you have an inflatable couch. You need to get this out of here." And I said, "You're completely right, officer. We will get it out of here." And then we had to take that down and yell at Gabe and Grant to stop doing somersaults in the not somersaults, but what were they doing?
Cartwheels.
They were doing cartwheels in the crosswalk, which it was hilarious. For
the other key thing about those hanging out at Eckerd after school was that payphone was Prank Call Central.
100
Go Jimmy.
Go Jimmy. So it sounds like Brandon and Ron, you guys more or less peaked at 16 years old.
Yeah. If we were alive, with all the internet technology we have today and smartphones, we totally could have had a more captivating YouTube channel than any of the crap that you see on TV right now. I've got an 8-year-old now, and she's completely addicted to some really horrible content, and we would have made much better content. I'm just saying.
We had some pretty good GeoCities pages, though.
Yeah.
Hey, Brandon, let's switch gears here. I want to talk about New York City, as much as Olean is fun. You've been there quite a while now. You're going to get a slice of pizza in New York. Where are you going to get it?
All right. The best slice in the city is Joe's on Carmine, in my opinion. That is the best pepperoni slice. And for me now, it's always a treat because it's in the West Village. I almost never go to the West Village, and if I'm there, it's because I'm eating somewhere else, so I'm not going to go get a slice of pizza on top of that. But it's like just the right amount of like cheese, sauce, pepperoni, just the right amount of greasy. It's also known as the pizza place Peter Parker worked at in Spider-Man 2.
I was going to say, you've taken me there. I remember we got in line there. Yeah. That was good pizza.
Yeah. For best single slice in the city, Joe's on Carmine. Now there are some other places that have good pies, but they don't necessarily serve by the slice. So like down the street from Joe's is Bleecker Street Pizza, which is just delicious brick oven thin crust pizza. And another place in Hell's Kitchen called Don Giovanni's, which has a very good brick oven pie. And that's the thing too, is there's a big difference between a slice and a pie. Like there are plenty of places I'll go and they have a great pie, but the slice isn't as good because, pizza places, sometimes they'll just make a pie, leave it out and take a slice. And yeah, even when they're reheating it in the oven, which is the way to do it.
Yep.
It just doesn't work as good.
Yeah.
Like the place I lived in, Flatbush, you visited me there, Ron. There's a pizza place there, and I remember we went there one day to get a slice, and it was just not good. But anytime I got the pie, it was great.
Yeah.
You've been living in New York for a while now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, where we grew up originally, Western New York, it's a totally different pizza, right? It's definitely thicker and doughier. I always think of the cup and chard pepperoni. I mean, be honest with me. Does Western New York hold a candle, or are you totally like it's either New York pizza or it's nothing at all?
I'm generally like New York or nothing. Sometimes when I go back to Olean, I can go for a Renna slice.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other pizzas, like, it just doesn't do it the same way. I've been spoiled.
And how do you, as a New Yorker, feel about Alex living in Chicago, about Chicago deep dish? Like, do you view it as pizza? Because I know that's something that gets contentious with some people. Or is it just like, hey, it's a different experience and it is what it is?
I honestly haven't had a lot of Chicago deep dish in my lifetime, and I don't know if I ever have interest in, because there's so much emphasis on the crust and the dough there.
Yeah.
Which is probably my least favorite part of the pizza.
I would never necessarily advocate, like if you were to visit me in Chicago, I would only get deep dish if you ask for it. I don't have any preference towards deep dish. In fact, probably my favorite pizza in Chicago is actually Detroit style pizza.
Really?
Which is like the tray style. It's like pan, and it does have the cup and chard. It actually is a little bit like Western New York pizza. But now deep dish pizza, I feel like I'm eating lasagna in pizza form. It's too much for me. I only have it when guests are visiting. That's the only time I have deep dish.
I kind of feel, and this is me not, being a deep dish knower, so apologies to any of your Chicago friends listening to this. I feel if you were going to have a good deep dish pizza, it would have to be a New York pizza, because of the water that goes in the dough that makes the bagels as good as they are. I feel like if I'm going to have a deep dish pizza, it would have to be a New York, and because of that, because whatever it is in the water just makes the dough better.
Well, it's funny because Ron and I talked about this on episode 1. We talked about, as we've moved to different parts of the country, you certainly, certain foods, especially bagels, you just can't, when I moved to Texas, I lived in Texas for 2 years, Brandon. I don't know if you knew that. And there's some great brisket and some great Tex-Mex, but for the life of me, I couldn't get a good bagel. And they say it's because of the New York water, and maybe it's true. I don't know.
So here's a story I saw earlier about the late, great Larry King.
Yep.
Who passed away the day of this recording. Somebody on Twitter posted a story about how they were a waitress that worked at a restaurant, and Larry King would come in sometimes and talk about how he just can't get the right bagel. He can't get the perfect bagel. And ultimately what he did is Larry King in LA opened his own bagel shop and got some sort of machine in there that would replicate the perfect Brooklyn water to make them. I think it's literally called the Perfect Bagel Company in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
That's impressive.
I love that.
Like, I think the gist of it was he basically found a way to open a shop that was replicating like Brooklyn water treatment plants.
Yeah.
to make this happen.
But there has to be a lot said about the ingredients, and water is one of those things that's so essential, and yet depending on where you go, water can be very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
I understand your heart is in New York City for pizza. It's New York or nothing. Talk to us. The best pairing with pizza is wings. Where are the best places in the world for chicken wings?
Well, the best place, full stop, is Duff's. Duff has the best wing. And Duff's is the OG. Oh, no, scrap that. Because wasn't Anchor Bar
Anchor
first?
Bar is technically the OG, but Duff's slogan essentially is we improved on what was already great.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, my favorite wing is Duff's by far. Like anytime I'm in Buffalo, I'll go to one Duff's locations. When I've had to go to the Toronto Film Festival, I made a point to going to the Duff's in Toronto. Like my favorite wing is from Duff's by far. When I lived in Buffalo, going to grad school, I worked in an electronics store, and Duff's was like right in between where I worked and where I lived. So every Friday, I would make a point of cashing my paycheck and then picking up Duff's on the way home and getting like just far more than I was going to eat that night, just so I would have lunch for the rest of the weekend after payday. Easily the best.
I love it. So there's no place in New York City that competes.
So there are some good places in New York. Like Duff's the best. That doesn't mean others aren't good. It is hard to find a good wing here. There are a few places that have done it. So I will say there's an Anchor Bar here that I have not had a chance to go to. So who knows if it stands up to the original or not. Your mileage may vary when, the original favorite starts franchising out. But there are good buffalo wings specifically at a place on the Upper East Side called Bar Coastal, which is a place I would go to with my friends often. There is Blondie's on the Upper West Side that has a good wing. And in Brooklyn, in Cobble Hill, there's a place called Wing Bar that has good wings. They're the places that know how to do it. Most other places where I get a wing from, so I like to get my wings mild. That's weird to some, but I like to have like the little bit of heat, but still be able to like taste it. I like the taste. And the mistake a lot of people seem to make with mild wings is, oh, mild, put less sauce on it. And that's not how it works. No, like mild just means there's more butter to dilute the Frank's Red Hot.
Right.
It's not the quantity of sauce, it's how much heat is in there.
It's the ratio between butter and hot sauce.
Yeah,
exactly. And most people don't do it that way. It really feels like they're like mild, medium, hot. All right, that means we're gonna put more or less hot sauce on it and call it a day.
Hey, so Brandon, obviously we're all dealing with COVID. We're all dealing with it in different ways. I know that you got really into Animal Crossing this past summer. Are you still playing? Have you eased up? What are you doing to, pass the time right now?
Well, I'm still playing a lot of video games, but Animal Crossing is not as much one of them. I mean, we all know, anyone that played Animal Crossing and was there know that the timing of that was just absurd. Like, it came out in March, right after people started going into lockdown. And
it was perfect timing.
Yeah. I don't really like the life sim games like that. Like, I've played The Sims a bit. I like SimCity, but I can only play them for so much. These games aren't really for me, but I think it was really the everyone showing off their islands on social media and then seeing like some of my friends go hang out at each other's islands. I was kind of like, we're stuck here and everything is terrible. And even though I don't know what's going on with my job, particularly because my job at the time was working for a Broadway show, which has been heavily impacted, obviously. I was like, even though I don't know what's going on here, I think I'm just going to like splurge and buy this game. Why not? And, the weird thing is when my Nintendo sends out their stats at the end of every year to show like how many hours you played. Turns out I played Animal Crossing in 2020 more than all games combined in 2019.
Wow.
Just that one game. It's pretty sad.
At the same time, in your defense, you've had a lot more free time in 2020 than you did in 2019.
Yes, this is very true. Yeah, like it really was a weird way of like introducing a sense of routine when there was no longer a real routine, and escapism, and being able to like in some way go to visit friends at their places. But, you know, as time has gone on, I'm still trying to fill out my Critterpedia, but I've done pretty much everything I wanted to do in the game besides that.
Did you attend a wedding?
I did not. Well,
a real wedding. People did that.
I did not attend a real wedding. I attended people's birthdays, but no wedding.
You know, Brandon, I don't know if Ron told you this, but when I was playing, there was a period where Ron just started sending me all his trash in the mail, like just like literally trash or like the nuclear. They look like the waste, you know, buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started decorating a big section of my island as this like horrible wasteland. It was all just like, and that's where all my residents lived. So it was just this little corner. And it was like, and I put all of the residents as close as possible together. It was like little row homes, and I just, it was like all trash and like the tires, and then Ron sent me. He started sending me these like the big tall walls,
Like
and so then I started blocking. Yeah, so then I started blocking off their entire area so no one could get in or out. I mean, it was quite a routine. And then the lady, I forget her name when she assesses your islands.
Isabel,
is it? Yep.
Yeah, I went from like a 4-star island to like a 1-star island, and I was like, okay, I gotta clear this all up. So, but that was kind of fun for a while.
I saw pictures of it. Ron sent them to me. I did not know that it generated by him just like sending you trash unsolicited.
Oh, well, it started out just very briefly like that. And then I started asking for more because I said, listen, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all out. So then I started saying, can you come? And it was great because Ron and his wife, both of them, would come, inventories completely stocked full, and come visit my island and just start tossing it all over, dumping trash all over my islands. And so then, of course, I had to pick it up, and then I had to put it in this little wasteland area, which is where all my residents were. And then, like, I was getting 3 or 4 residents a day asking, you know how they ask you like permission to leave? Like, I'm looking at other opportunities. Can I leave your island? And I kept declining their request. I said, no, you're gonna stay in that trash hole.
That's great.
Well, you're forgetting one more thing too. So Alex also, at one point we discovered the like sackcloth, clothing that you can donate to the residents, and that just really kind of took it to the next level.
Oh,
I mean, it kind of was like, it reminds me of like Harry Potter with Dobby, where it was like that was the type of clothing that these villagers were wearing while living in the Alex, tenement housing. So
They were all looking like bummy claws.
Yeah, and it got to the point, Brandon, where what I was noticing is if you give them those like sacks, they have patches on it. They're really, really disgusting looking. I realized they don't wear them every day. The only way to ensure that is you have to buy or give them multiple sets. So I would keep giving them multiple of those same outfits, and then that was able to guarantee they wore those bummy outfits every day. It was awesome.
Yeah, there was one time where I was trying to conspire to make everyone dressed up like a mummy. And so I started by one day I gave them all like the mummy, like the body wrap.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to all give them the helmet, which first I didn't realize at the time you couldn't give them the helmets. Like they just wouldn't wear them. Hats, yes. Helmets, no. But when I went to do that, they were just wearing whatever other clothes they had anyway. So that completely thwarted my plan to make everyone look like a mummy.
Yeah, if you only give them one set, they only wear it every like 3 days. So to ensure that, you have to give them multiple of the exact same clothing item.
So one of my favorite things to do in it was with the customized clothing, I made a hat. So you might remember this. but Real Big Fish had a piece of merch that was the Play Beer hat. They got so tired of people coming to their shows and just standing in the crowd yelling, "Play beer, hey, play beer," that they just made a hat that literally said "Play Beer" on it. And that was that was the only hat I owned at the time. Over the summer, when I could not get a haircut, I started getting many more hats to offset that, to cover up my terrible hair. But to truly make it look like me, I customized the Play Beer hat in the game. And when I would go to other people's islands and go to the clothing store and went to the place where it was like, oh, we're taking designs from other people, I would put my Play Beer hat on the island, and I would have people get very upset when the residents started wearing the Play Beer hat.
I love that.
I mean, some people didn't, but I was amused when I got an upset text about it.
Did you like playing the stock market, or did you think that was sort of like cheating?
I don't think it's cheating, but I don't like the stock market.
Well, I think some people I knew felt like you're fast forwarding the game in a way, right? Like all of a sudden, within a couple weeks, you can have more money than you know what to do with. And then you can buy anything you want. Like I think certain people I knew at least thought it's like, yeah, like you're kind of like diminishing like the grunt work that is required in this game.
I mean a little bit, but there's still there's so much other grunt work to be done in it. Like if you want to populate the museum, you can't just buy a fish, you know?
Yeah.
Even so, you still can't just buy whatever you want. You have to be able to like find it and make sure it's in your catalog too, right? So it like makes things easier, like being able to pay off your house and move bridges around, and some of the stuff with like cosmetic changes with like bridges and ramps and stuff like that. But like there's still plenty of stuff that, you know, the money doesn't buy. Now, if you time travel in the game, that's a completely different story, which isn't something I...
Can you explain that to the listeners? What is time traveling?
Yeah, time traveling is literally just resetting the date and time on your Switch. So when you play Animal Crossing, it thinks it's a different day. And you can, you know, if you have a good day on your stock market and you missed it, you can set your calendar back on the Switch and go and take advantage of the price you had.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon. Weren't people fast forwarding the year as well? Like all of a sudden you're able to go into the winter and you're able to get clothes or grow plants and crops that were only available, or fish that were only available in that particular season.
Oh, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I think so.
I think there are some things. I think the answer to that is yes and no. Like I think for stuff like the fish and the bugs, you could, but there's other things like the winter events. I don't think you could access those necessarily.
Yeah, I think those got added with later patches.
Yeah,
but to be fair, though, I think Animal Crossing has been a game that you can kind of play it how you want to. So if your desire is to try to shortcut it, you can do that. But that's going to be at your own detriment. It's kind of like cheating with a lot of games. Like if you want to, you can do cheating.
So do you think the stock market is a small form of cheating?
I don't think so. I mean, as somebody who played it, I think that it's something that you can certainly get access to a lot of things that you wouldn't normally be able to get access to without doing as much grunt work. And it depends on whether or not you view that grunt work as essential to the game or not. There's a lot of people, I think, who are like, yeah, this is boring. I don't want to do the fishing. I just want to basically get the stuff that I want, decorate as I want to. And to each their own.
And the other thing is like the stock, like unless you are time traveling, the stock market, you know, that's an intended part of the game. You know, the designers put it in there. So technically it's not cheating. And also in a bubble, you have to kind of like know what you're doing, and it's kind of a gamble too, right?
Yeah.
Like people figured out exactly what the patterns look like, but you don't know whether your turnips are going to be higher or lower or really high that week. So it's still like kind of a gamble.
I knew people, there was a dedicated subreddit on Reddit. I don't know if you knew this, where people would say, yeah, my turnips price right now is 600. I will give you the key, the whatever, the number to my island if you're willing to bring X number of whatever or whatever. So I knew people who, I mean, maybe that is a form of cheating where it's not even your immediate friends. It's literally strangers who just have a really high price
it's
right
working
now.
the system for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also, I think it's to each their own. I mean, it's something where I see it like Sue's, my wife, she plays it daily. She's dedicated to it. Evie, she plays it, I think most days she plays it when she isn't in trouble. But she's got her own Switch. So even between those two, that's two separate islands. So I know that Suze and Evie are also both checking like, okay, well, what's the price of turnips today on Evie's island or Suze's island? And
That's crazy.
But yeah, but I think it's something where it's teach their own, you know.
I agree with that.
If your goal is to basically like, hey, I just want to get as much as I can out of this game, I don't want to play the stock market, you don't have to.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I've gotten pretty much everything I can out of the game aside from catching all of the sea critters. I've caught all the fish and bugs.
Yeah,
but the sea creatures, I still have a few. So I've moved on to many other games at this point.
Does something actually happen once you've completed everything? Like, is there anything does the owl do anything differently?
He congratulates you on bringing the last fish or bug there. I don't think, because I think it's meant to be like an ongoing thing. It's like I feel like it's one of those things where you've completed it when you feel like you've done everything you can, and they keep adding updates, seasonally, so it has a life beyond. I think it's like what Ron was saying, to each their own, like however you want to play it. Like if you want to keep going in there and maintaining it every day, that's fine. I think there are a lot of people that at this point are like, yeah, I'm done with it.
Well, I got to say, Brandon, this has been a pleasure. I think you've been a great guest, and don't get me wrong, I think we've had some wonderful guests in the past, but this has definitely been special having you as a guest tonight. So I think we're excited. We're going to have you come back. There's a lot of different topics. I know it's kind of funny. So part of the behind the scenes, we put together a list of proposed questions for each of our guests. And I think we only cut to like maybe 25% of those because there's just so much that we talked about tonight. So this has been great. It's been awesome having you on, man.
Yeah, glad to be here. And yeah, you're right. I'm glad to come back because I think there is a lot of other stuff we can talk about given how far the three of us go back.
Brandon, again, thank you so much. We look forward to having you on at a later date. And with that, we'll talk to you soon. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Fingers crossed.